Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Just going to give it about half a minute to a minute for Zoom to catch up and to let everyone else join. I can see the attendees are slowly trickling in here. Give it to 1 minute past, and then we will crack on. Cool. We'll get started. So thank you everyone for joining today. Let me just go back on this. So today's webinar is basically using Fathom's benchmarking tool to provide proactive advice. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the more underutilized aspects of Fathom. And I think the kind of general principles applied, even if you don't use benchmarking or don't use Fathom, you can still apply to your practice to help your clients ultimately. So going to be a little bit of a practical one today, similar to the one yesterday and the rest of the ones this week. If you attended the one yesterday, you kind of know roughly what this entails. There'll be a couple of polls and stuff, but please do get involved. So quick agenda. So we're going to start off by just saying why it's important. Why do I feel this is a topic worth covering, basically. We'll then do a little bit of a reflection to see where the group's at in terms of benchmarking currently or providing kind of proactive courtesy calls currently. Then we'll go into a couple of tactics, actually between the reflection and tactics. I'll jump in product. It's not going to be an end-to-end product demo or anything like that. It's going to be short and snappy and shows you the practical outcomes that you can get from that particular area of the product. And at the end, there'll be a little bit of time so you can kind of assign actions from it, because I'm a big believer in doing stuff off the back of webinars and sales conferences. I think a lot of times I fall into the trap, as well as other people, of attending things and then like it sounds good but nothing happens at the end of it. So I really encourage you to really kind of use the reflection and the actions today to come away with dates and things to do, basically. So I'm actually just going to spin up a poll quickly, and then I'll do a little quick intro of myself, and we'll get into the meat of it. So let me just launch the first poll. It should be live there. Cool. In the meantime, I'll just provide a little bit of an overview of myself. Cool. So I'm the head of growth at EMEA. So I've been with Fathom for 4 years now. Set up the UK office, which kind of deals with all the EMEA things for Fathom. So a lot of the stuff that I'm discussing today and this week has come from existing users, trialists, prospects, and stuff from Fathom. So I'm kind of aggregating a lot of their advice and things that I think they've done really well, and kind of sharing that with the group today. So hopefully you can benefit from that as well. Thanks to those who are answering the poll. I will share the results shortly. It's interesting to see that. So it looks like a lot of people, most people don't benchmark, but some do. Most people don't benchmark with Fathom, but a couple do as well, which is good. And it's about 50-50 for the courtesy phone calls, which is an interesting one as well. Cool. There's a few trickling. I'll leave that running for a little bit. So rules of engagement. So just again, a couple of ground rules in terms of how this is going to run. So it's not going to be a product demo. I am going to jump into product, but like I say, that is just to showcase this one area of Fathom that helps you provide that advice. It's going to not go into anything like how you set it up or anything like that. Of course, if you're interested, reach out afterwards. We can sort that out separately, but I'm keen for this to be really practical, I guess, with actionable takeaways rather than just a bunch of information which may or may not be relevant for your specific practice and your use case. Number 2 is get involved. So please do, if you can, get involved with the polls. If there's any questions, please do use the Q&A. I'll pick them up as I go. We have a bit of time at the end allocated in case there's quite a few as well. This will be recorded. So if you want to refer back to the recording at the end, that's absolutely fine. It'll be released later on this week or early next week, alongside a practical PDF. So a lot of the tactics and points made today will be covered off in the PDF, as well as a checklist that you can actually sit down and go through as a firm to see how you kind of score against that. third one here, provide feedback to me. So there'll be my contact details in a couple of slides here. You can just reach out to anyone at Fathom who can pass it back on to me. But I'm keen to know whether you think it's useful or not. If it obviously if it's not useful, I won't do it again. If it is useful, we can roll out more content similar to this, whether that's a webinar or written content next year. There will be a poll at the end of this webinar as well, just to get a little bit of a survey about whether you think that it is helpful. Number 4 again is take action. So please do take action off the back of this webinar. Cool. I'll close the poll now and share the results so you can see where you sit with everyone else. Cool. So why do I think benchmarking in general is quite helpful? And it's worth stating from the outset here actually that the in-product application side of it's obviously going to be Fathom specific, and that's just internal benchmarking. So that's just like picking some of your clients and combining with other clients, like little pools or little groups, and then you anonymize the data and you can see how they're faring. So whenever you see that in the product today, it will be internal benchmarking, although external benchmarking is also quite handy as well for similar reasons that are on the screen. But the 3 kind of brackets that I've put here are more insight, gaining trust, and more fees. It's more insight. It's one thing to say to a client, here's how your gross profit margin is going, for instance, but sometimes putting that alongside industry peers is a little bit more helpful because you can see whether the whole industry is going through like a bad time or like a golden patch, whatever the case may be, and that adds that additional level of context. Whereas if you're comparing, construction client with like a SaaS client, it's going to be quite difficult to actually draw any comparisons there between the two. So it does provide more insight to the recipient of the information. The second one is gaining trust. So again, I think like a key theme that I've heard a lot of accountants, particularly the kind of tech first accountants, mention is becoming like a business partner to their clients. Again, the kind of larger clients probably have in-house teams. There's a little bit of a different relationship, whereas the smaller kind of SME side of things, they really do need that kind of almost outsourced CFO and that trusted partner. And I think this is one way to gain that, because you can again take your anonymized learnings from other people within the group and share that with the client in question, which again adds that extra level of expertise and insight, really, and that extra level of trust. There's also organic referrals from this. So if someone said, oh, they're really good because they help me with X, Y, and Z, they're speaking to someone else in the industry who needs an accountant, there's always that potential for organic referrals, which is awesome. And also more fees, so it can help with client retention because it's something else that makes them a bit stickier with you. It's not just hey, here's a standard report and standard 5 KPIs and that's it. It's actually you're providing that extra level of advice, and also with like the proactivity, which we're going to touch on quite a bit today. That again is going to help the client feel like you're a partner and therefore less likely to potentially swap for a different firm, because they're like, well, the service I get with yourself is so good that you're not going to match that elsewhere because of that proactive nature. And also it's a USP. So not all firms benchmark, of course. It sounds like it's a bit of actually look, 74% don't currently benchmark in terms of the survey today. So that's interesting. So it's a USP that you can have to essentially market your services and provides that extra level of insight that distinguishes you from the rest of the crowd, basically. Cool. So we're going to do a quick reflection here. So I'll be quiet for a little bit, but I just want everyone to, if you already benchmarked, this should hopefully be kind of fairly straightforward. If you don't, it might take a little bit more time, but I want you to, if you have like a piece of paper or a Google Doc or a Notion page or whatever in front of you, if you could write down 10 clients who you feel like you could benchmark. If you don't have 10, it's 5 or 6, that's fine. Just pick 10 as a kind of arbitrary number. But if you can write down those 10 that you think you could group together, that'd be great. And the second step here, what common KPIs do they have that you can compare one against the other? And what industry trends do you feel they're facing at the moment? So I'll give you a minute or two on that, and then we'll move on. Okay, so hopefully that's enough time. If it isn't, just keep jotting down as we proceed here. But I really want you to keep these three answers in mind when you see the in-product application, because this is kind of how you'd go about it. You'd have your clients you'd initially group together. You'd obviously have to select the KPIs that they have in common, or some of these should be fairly straightforward, like gross profit, for instance, but some may be industry specific. And then you'll see later on in the product a couple of areas where you should be able to spot some industry trends depending on the configuration. So if I now jump in products, again, it's not going to be like an end-to-end product demo or anything like that. It's just going to give you a little bit of insight into how you can achieve this in Fathom. So let me just jump into my benchmark group. Cool. So a couple of things you can do here. So in terms of the actual, start with the more proactive element, and then we'll go back in terms of how you can tailor that advice once you've spotted a potential trend, perhaps. So I would start with the alert dashboard. Now, these alerts are kind of created at the individual company level, and you can trigger like a threshold. So if we pick on like, I don't know, gross profit percentages as an example, if that doesn't cross the threshold, but there is an alert configured, you see the little gray dot here. So if you hover over it, as you can see, we're saying if gross profit is less than 15%, it will alert. Obviously, it's a coffee corporation smashing it at 86%, so they're well clear. So therefore, it's not a red dot. Whereas if you move to the left here, debt to equity, there's no alert configured at all in the underlying entity, so it's not showing up here. Allied Biscuits, a few down here for gross profit, it is alerting because it looks like it's minus 71% gross profit, which is obviously in pretty dire straits there. But the thing that I think is really good with this is it gives you this holistic overview of your clients that you've grouped together. Now, I've seen this used in two different ways. So one is actually you can add all your clients to this dashboard. Depending how many you have added into the software, it might be quite a lot. It might just be 20 or 30, whatever. But then what you can do is see across your entire portfolio who is alerting and who isn't alerting. The second option, and you can always do both, of course, is to have a benchmark group that's specific to an area. So this one is kind of roughly a kind of coffee centric demo company. So a lot of these will be coffee entities, and that means that the comparison is a little bit more relatable, because as I said at the start, you don't necessarily want to compare a construction company with a SaaS company or a tech company. However, as the advisor, you might want one view. We can see all of the alerts that have alerted, basically. So a few different things you can gain from this, and this is where, again, this for me is like the first step to then providing that proactive courtesy call, digging in a little bit more into the data perhaps, and providing that advice to the client to become that trusted advisor. So here, first things first, you can see any kind of trends that are happening. So pretty quickly here, we can see that AP days, a lot of them are not alerting. So that looks like that's going pretty well. Inventory days is similar. It looks like receivable days is about 50-50 in the kind of this particular view, and profitability ratio is also alerting quite a bit with operating profit. So looks like those are the three things we can kind of almost double down on in terms of an industry-wide trend. So on this, there's a few ways you can go about this. You can provide like a proactive webinar. You can provide some email campaigns on how they can improve it. You can just brief the team to say, hey, next time you have a spare 10 minutes, can you call whichever kind of portfolio companies are part of their group, and then they can put that call in and say, well, we've noticed your AR days, your profitability ratio, etc. And this saves a lot of time, because otherwise you have to click into each individual entity beforehand, which you might do, but maybe let's say it's a monthly process, but this might flag it a little bit earlier. Or if it's quarterly, again, it's quite a long time to wait depending on your existing cadence. But if you bring that forward and see this alert dashboard, you know exactly who to reach out to. And as I mentioned, if it is a specific kind of metric that's trending across the industry, there might be a reason for that. So like maybe the industry is taking a bit of a turn for the worse, and the alerts might have actually just been configured too high to begin with. So that's fine. You don't want to worry anyone. You can go back in and change the alerts threshold. But it is important to have that kind of view across that industry. And of course, the other thing you can do is let's say, if I could try and pick on someone here, Canvas Coffee is alerting quite a bit. So let's say they're struggling a bit more than their peers. You might want to put in a proactive call to them, whereas Balanced Coffee is only one, so they're probably okay until the next one. So it helps you to determine which clients might benefit from that proactive call a little bit earlier than others. So again, I'm a big fan of this sort of dashboard. Just got a question come in from Alison, which is a great question. And the question is, are these KPIs preset in Fathom? So the answer is yes. So all of these KPIs are preset, and they're kind of a standard out of the box KPIs for your alert dashboard, because it's set in the individual entity. But again, if any are not relevant, or you don't want to have them like alerting, for instance, like interest cover, you can see here, there's no alerts configured. If there are any more questions that come up, please do send them in. I will try and jump on them as we go. So let's say Canvas Coffee, we decide we're going to make this proactive call. We think actually they need this call earlier. Balanced Coffee doesn't. So another step, just before you kind of call them, I'd actually recommend obviously digging into financials a little bit more in the individual entity, which you won't cover off today. If you're familiar with Fathom, you probably do that kind of day in, day out anyway. But what I would do is jump back to the compare visual. So if I now pick Canvas Coffee, we can see Canvas Coffee is doing really well for revenue, which is great. But maybe we want to compare it with something else. So what you can do in your benchmark group is have different ways to segment your clients in that benchmark group, which I think is really, really important, particularly if you're going to start making peer comparisons and packaging up that data. So here, for instance, it's just currently sorted A to Z, which is pretty arbitrary. You can do it by result, which again is fairly arbitrary, but then you can actually create these different categories. So you do this in the benchmark group, and you assign the underlying entity to one of the, or one of the answer soil sections in these three categories. So if I go to region, we can see that Canvas Coffee is actually in the south. So if there's going to be a big geographical difference here, we might want to compare Canvas Coffee to Universal Baristas. So if we want to do that, we can just drag and drop, and we'll have the two compared here. And now if I change from total revenue to maybe gross profit margin, you can see how they're going. So we can already see that in the south, for two different coffee companies with similar levels of turnover, Universal Baristas has almost double the or actually bang on double the profit margin, the gross profit margin. So what can we then take from Universal Baristas operating model and pass on the Canvas Coffee to kind of help them increase that profit margin? And that's where a lot of this kind of proactivity will come in. So not only kind of like the bad alert happening, but what can we take from this other client who we've kind of grouped together in this benchmark group to help them get from A to B and to rectify that alert, but not only rectify the alert, help them go to that next level. And again, there's a bunch of ones here. Operating profit margin you can have. You can go into your chart of accounts as well. So like maybe there's like a cash difference here. You can see that. Looks like the cash isn't quite configured in the demo company, but you can start to kind of mix and match all of these to see exactly what the differences are basically. And there's also different segments you can do. So it doesn't have to be region. Again, this is just one that we hard coded in. You can pick size, which we just did again pretty randomly. So they're both large in terms of turnover, which makes sense. And you can also go by industry. So you see they're in transport and professionals, the kind of ones that we put them in. So maybe that's something else as well. We can compare Canvas Coffee to someone else in the professional one, for instance. So this gives you a little bit of additional insight before you kind of reach out to the client in question. The other thing I would just say quickly on this is you can remove any outliers. If I go back to region, perhaps you can come up here and just trim this down a little bit to show the kind of the correct ones, or I guess like remove those outliers to have a better view, and it'll give you the average as well. In the individual PDFs that you send to your clients, if you do kind of a reporting pack, whether that's combines actuals and forecasts, or it's just one or the other, you can also have this benchmark data in there. So again, it gives a little bit more insight, because it will tell, in this case, Canvas Coffee, that they're actually under the average of 37%, which provides that additional level of insight, because they may think, well, actually, you've gone up from 14 to 16, like job's done, but you can actually tell them, well, that is an improvement, but our averages are saying 37, so here's how you can potentially try and get to that level. There is also the rank tool. I'll touch on this really briefly. This is just another view of the compare tool, where you can compare a few. So we were comparing Canvas Coffee, weren't we? And I think that was it Balance or something? Balance Coffee. We'll say Balance Coffee, Universal Baristas as well. So I'll pick a few of these. So now you can see where they are on the different metrics. So this gives you multiple metrics in one view. The other one just gives you one metric that you have to kind of toggle between. I typically find that people have a preference either or, but they both do serve their purposes. So you can scroll through and say, well, inventory days is really good here, but AR days is really bad. So how can we kind of take those learnings each way with this person who we're kind of grouping them with in terms of their peers? So again, I think once you've set this up, it can be industry specific, which makes sense if you're going to use it in a PDF with the averages, because if you're grouping with other people, the averages won't quite make sense. But you can have a single entity in multiple benchmark groups. So you could have an entire client benchmark group, and then you can kind of use that as part of a process to work out who needs to have that kind of proactive call to be that trusted advisor. So if I now just jump back to the slide deck, check these, no questions come in, perfect. So now a couple of just tactics to take away, and then there'll be some actions at the end for you to kind of reflect on as well. So the first one is to group your clients into groups or niches. So obviously certain firms, depending on how they prefer to kind of go to market, you might have a specific niche. We have quite a few at Fathom, like customers, for instance, who niche. It could be like agencies, it could be construction, it could be SaaS, whatever it is. If you have a niche, obviously it's quite easy to benchmark them all together. If it's more of a holistic client base, let's say, with different industries, you might want to group them into specific groups to make the benchmarking data a little bit more relevant. But again, don't feel like you can't have an entire client one to provide that proactive advice and see all the alerts in one view. So number two is to add benchmark data into your PDF reports. I mean, particularly if anyone on the call is using Fathom, I would definitely do that, because there's no additional cost and there's this additional upside and insight that is provided for that. Again, just a word of caution, I'd make sure that is a benchmark group, which is with the peers, not an all clients one, because the all clients one, you'd be kind of apples and oranges to a certain extent. So tactic number three, so again, this is probably the biggest one, to be honest, is great having a benchmark group, but you have to obviously use it. So I think you'd have to revise your process to include checking the alerts dashboard and having a process to, I guess, in terms of putting that call in or email, whatever it is, ahead of your next scheduled meeting if X, Y, or Z happens. This is going to be very firm specific. It might be a certain number of KPIs. It might be a KPI alerting significantly beyond the threshold, whatever the case is. But I'll definitely have a process to check them. And if a certain client is, so there's a lot of red dots there, I would definitely put in a call or think about reaching out before your next scheduled call. Of course, if it's the next day, there's probably no need to. But if it's kind of in a month or two from now, it's probably worth getting ahead of the curve a little bit. And also, it's not just putting client calls, as I mentioned. It also gives you a bit of an insight into the industry trends there. So how can you do a one-to-many approach in terms of your marketing or like educational content that you can send out to your clients, maybe even prospective clients, to help win more business that way, and say, hey, we've noticed through our data that again, the SaaS industry, the gross profit is down, or the case may be. Here's how you can try and turn that around. and we're running a webinar next week on how to help it. So again, that might be a little bit more of a scalable way if you have quite a lot of clients and maybe not a lot of time to put in a bunch of individual calls. You can kind of cherry pick the key clients who are at most at risk, and then do the one-to-many for everyone else. And market the benchmarks. Again, in the poll earlier, it said that the majority of people here who answered don't currently benchmark, which gives them an opportunity to obviously change and offer that service. But for those who already do, it is a USP. So you can say that you benchmark. And again, depending on how you go to market in general as a firm, you could have a specific niche. And if you do, then benchmarking is pretty quick to spin up because they're all in the same group. But also you definitely want to double down on that niche with your benchmarking. So definitely market the services that you offer. You can do this on email, social media, website, etc. But it is a USP that again provides that additional level of insight and context to client data. I think, can someone chat if they can hear me? Because someone said that they might have lost the audio. And if everyone's lost the audio, then I'm obviously hitting an issue. Still good. Okay, perfect. I'll type back to them. Cool. Thank you for those who said they can still hear me. So yeah, definitely market your offering. It's actually just as an aside for anyone who wasn't on the webinar yesterday about kind of your management information service offering. Quite a lot of people said they don't market it, or those who do, most of them say they don't market it enough. So definitely there's a bit of a gap there to help put your firm ahead of some others in terms of winning that work. So actions. So hopefully that has been helpful. I'm actually going to spin up this poll now, so do answer. And if you thought it wasn't helpful, just say it wasn't helpful. That's absolutely fine. I'm keen to get some feedback to work out how we should structure our content and webinars in EMEA for next year. But again, I'm really keen on people taking actions from this. So if anything has resonated, if there's anything you think actually we do that really well, or maybe we have to adjust the process on something, just jot that down. Obviously tying it back to your reflection with those 10 clients, you did that reflection at the start, and put dates beside them. And really kind of, I guess, have a bias for action, because it's great hearing a lot of content, but if you don't do anything with it, it's hopefully not really worth any of your time. Hopefully no one feels like that now, but if you do, apologies. But yeah, definitely have some actions. So write those down. I'll spin up this second poll. If you could answer that, that would be wonderful. Just two quick questions. It was useful, and if you kind of prefer this more practical reflection, action-orientated webinar, or a more thought leadership one with like a peer speaking about their process, basically. Perfect, thank you. Those questions are coming through. So whilst you kind of answer the poll, think about your actions and what the next steps are for you and your firm, I'm just going to go on to the final slide, which is my contact details. So again, if there's any long form feedback that you'd like to offer, or if there's any specific questions you have, or if you want someone to go through benchmarking in more detail or whatever, just ping me an email and I'll put you in touch with the best person, or I'll answer myself, of course, depending on whether or not your account managed and stuff like that. But hopefully that was helpful. It looks like most people found it helpful who did answer, which is definitely what I want to see. So thank you for that. As I mentioned at the start, there will be a recording sent out. It might be towards the end of this week or early next week, but keep your eyes kind of peeled for that. And it will also come out with a practical PDF, so you can refer back to the kind of main points in the little checklist to see how you're faring against that PDF. There are some more webinars coming up during this week, so if you're interested in those, sign up. There's one tomorrow specifically on forecasting and using the business roadmap. And then the ones on Thursday and Friday are more designed for in-house accountants rather than in practice. But obviously you're welcome to join those as well if you want to. But thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate the time. Any questions, please do let me know.